Okay, and we are live with our 29th episode of Absolute AppSec. I'm Ken Johnson at CK Tricky on Twitter, joined by my co-host Seth Law at Seth Law on Twitter. Seth, say hi.
Hey everybody, welcome once again.
Before we get started, we have just a couple things to mention once again. AppSec USA is coming up, and that's in October. They've got training. We're giving training there. There's other folks giving training. Jim Manico, who was on, is giving training. And our guest tonight, Matt Tesauro. Actually, am I saying that right, Matt?
Yeah, you're saying it perfect. And it's not Smith, so props to you.
That's awesome. So Matt will actually be there. So we're gonna chat. I'm about to introduce Matt. So we're going to chat with Matt and he'll tell you more. But if you want to ask him questions in person and talk to Matt, he'll be at AppSec USA. So yeah, we'll all be there. We'll also all be available for questions and whatnot. So I'm going to introduce Matt real quick. So if you don't know Matt, Matt's spoken pretty much everywhere, like AppSec USA, LastCon, AppSec Cali, Velocity Conf, and there's a whole other list of, I think it's AppSec Brazil, whole list of places that Matt's spoken at. So Matt's worked for Rackspace. Currently is the community and operation director of community and operations at OWASP. Matt has done a lot of basically a lot of work around AppSec automation in the pipeline, and also is currently working with others on the DefectDojo project. So I know that you, Matt, are giving training at LastCon 2018, which is in the, I think, third week of October or the end of October, on implementing an AppSec pipeline and using the DefectDojo. So hopefully I've covered the bases of who Matt is, but I'm sure, if you're watching, you've probably heard of Matt. So welcome, Matt, and thanks for coming on.
Oh, thank you for having me. It was great. I would love getting the invite, and I'm happy to be here. Love spreading the AppSec joy to the world. Yeah,
we're going to kick into it right away. But yeah, we love to have folks like yourself that are, veterans in the space and can kind of speak to the history and give context and talk about, share their origin story and war stories. And so I think that's where we're going to kick right off is tell us about your origin story. How did you get into application security?
Yeah, it was kind of a circuitous path, I guess. It was quite a long time ago. I was at Texas A&M University. I was an undergrad, actually in economics of all things, before I realized that people would actually pay me to fart around on these computer things. Like, my dad had bought an 8088 way back when, and he was going to telecommute, which is really cute. That never happened on an 8088, but he was going to do it, and I had that in the basement in his office, so we played around with that and played. Actually, my first sort of programming or hacking-y kind of thing was I wanted to win this text-based adventure game that was written in DOS. So I actually read the source code and figured out how to solve the thing. So I go way back with computers, but I was a econ undergrad, and I realized people actually pay people to fart around on computers. So why am I in an econ degree? And I did the math, and it was actually quicker for me to switch over and get a master's than get an undergrad. So I switched over, got a master's in MIS. And oddly enough, when I graduated, got an offer from a company in Bryan College Station, Texas, which is not a particularly big city, a place called Viatel that's no longer with us. But they had their IT operations in Bryan College Station, Texas, but the bulk of their customers in the UK, the Netherlands, France, and Belgium. It's a really weird beast. And I was hired to be an app programmer to do web apps, actually, back when Netscape was a cool thing. So it was forever ago, 2000-ish, I think. And that was my first job, was writing web apps in Java before they had servlets. And PHP 3.03, I think, was what I was programming in. This is ancient times.
Very ancient, yeah.
I am so sorry.
Yeah, I had to ride the code uphill both to and from work.
Yes.
in
But,
10 feet of snow.
In 10 feet of snow. It was
Yeah.
awful. It was really funny, though. Actually, I was talking to somebody at a conference just like last year and talking about how, like, when I had this job at Viatel, if I foobarred something, and I did several times, you'd get a pissed off Belgian calling you at like 2 a.m, screaming at you. And I was like, it was so awful because I had to get in my car and drive to work and fix it. And they were like, well, why'd you go to work? I'm like, dude, back then you didn't remote into the office. You freaking drove your happy backside into the office. Like, there was no VPN like magic. No, forget it. Like, I had to get in a car and drive in. So you want like a good sort of incentive for quality when you get woken up at 2 and have to get in a car and drive into work. Like, it's a great quality incentive. And one of the interesting things at Viatel is there was like 6 or 8 of us in the web app, development group, that when we would finish, before we'd really submit to the QA at this company, we'd all kind of say, hey, I'm done with my app. Everybody else in the team, check it out. And the goal was to destroy your coworker's app. And so I got done with my first thing, like fresh out of college, like a freaking idiot, and was like, dude, I'm done. My thing works. Try it out. And they just completely blew it up to pieces. I mean, owned it left, right, and sideways. I made all the classical mistakes. And it was great for me because it was a very safe environment. I mean, yeah, I had to eat a lot of crow for my coworkers, but it was a very safe environment to find this lesson. Like, oh crap, if I ask for a telephone number, people will actually put something that isn't a telephone number in for it. Wow, what a radical concept, right?
Yeah, you didn't find out from dark reading or TechCrunch or something.
No. And so that was a very good experience until when they started talking about how much cash they had on hand and they were fine and don't believe the stuff you read in the papers. And that would be right when I left, right before they bombed away. And I spent some time at A&M as kind of the web guy, running a bunch of Linux servers and writing web apps for the business school at A&M. Went to Austin, saw this one talk where this person I ended up meeting and really liking, Bert Hayes, was saying, hey, we're hiring pen testers. If you want to be a pen tester, you should contact me. Ha, ha, ha. And I thought, he's kind of joking. He must have been joking. There's no way he's there. But I thought, you know what? I'll ping them and see. And sure enough, they were hiring. And I can't believe this actually worked, but I had just gotten my CISSP, and they were really impressed with that. So they hired me to be a pen tester because I had a CISSP, which anybody who has one of those knows that's hardly a qualification, but hey, it got me in the door.
That's all it takes, right? That's all it takes.
I was golden. So I was actually hired to do pen testing for the state of Texas, and I did that for several years. And that was a great learning crucible, just going in and actually doing the other side. Like, I'd been on the defense side at A&M, and actually A&M was crazy. Like, it's like, oh, it's campus, it's safe. There's 40,000 bored students behind a firewall. We had, I think our average time for this is Windows XP, mind you, but Windows XP, if you put it on the network, was 6 minutes before it was popped. So like, we went and bought a cable modem router so we could install computers behind it just to get them patched up before we actually put them on the real network. It was nut, man. It was crazy.
Wow.
I love your face. That's priceless.
So much to consume there. So much to.
Yeah, it was pretty ugly, but I mean, in that environment, it was ugly, but it's also really a great learning environment because you had to make your servers pretty rugged or they got popped. I mean, it just happened left, right, and sideways.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, you were asking me a question. What's up?
No, so I mean, from this experience, I mean, is this you mentioned a few things here where so your web app getting owned, you're dealing with these boxes getting popped, and all this made you want to go into security?
Yeah, surprisingly, it did, and it started with like, I didn't want my boxes to get popped. Like, they're my babies. You're not going to touch them. But I didn't have a clue how to do that, so I started reading like, how do you like harden a Linux box and that kind of a thing, and then. I don't remember where I read, somewhere along the line online somewhere, I bumped into WebGoat. And I was like, oh, this WebGoat thing, this is interesting. And I poked around with it and like, oh, SQL injection, what is this? And oh my goodness. And then I realized what it took and I thought, oh shit, that thing I just wrote for the business school is totally SQL injectable. I need to go fix some code. I mean, it was, literally like, oh God, I've like made all of these mistakes of what I've just learned. And I think it was to me, the thing that keeps me in security and the thing I like about doing, particularly application security, is like the whole app development world is very messy with loads of gray. And you end up with these computers that have, or systems or apps, whatever, that have issues that are you have to keep them alive for the business, because they're, in most cases, like, right, a business is writing an app, they're making money off of it. So you can't just turn the thing off or shut it down for a week or whatever. So you have to sort of find this happy medium between keeping the thing up and running and working and being protected. And so I find that, like, that's where the really interesting, challenging ideas is, hey, we need to do this thing for business reasons, but it has all these scary parameters. How do we make this not scary? And you get to, do a little chin scratch and figure out, oh, well, what we can do is if we do this, and if we make sure we check this, and then we only allow these kind of things, then we're better. And so for me, that's been the draw for security. That, and it's never stopped changing at crazy speed.
No, I mean, standards keep changing every year in AppSec, there's new changes to CSP, there's new changes just to browser standards in general, like all the time. One of my is changing. Yeah. One
of my favorite tweets that I did ever, which was a long time ago, was RFC stands for read, forget, and create your own. That's so true. Like this was back in the Viatel days. We were implementing a XML RPC according to the RFC, and it was like a release candidate too. So it was very late in the process, and we made this entire system work with this RFC standard for XML RPC, and then the final 1.0 came out, totally different. Like,
that's
great.
That's how release candidates work, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a reason they call it the bleeding edge, right? I mean,
Yeah, I mean, from my limited, this is just from like anecdotal, like these are just from stories from other people that have been involved in RFC, like creating RFC specs. But like from what they've kind of said is that you'll go through this long, arduous process of getting everything, thinking through a lot of the standards, getting it all written out, having that back and forth with maybe one or two people really. And then at the very end, several people, like when you're like, all right, we're ready to basically release this, then a bunch of people pile on with, this, that, and the other. And so that one or two people that's been working on the spec the entire time end up having to rewrite things and dealing with that. So that's just what I've heard.
Well, that makes sense because when it's about to go and be released, that's when things get real and you wake up and have to have wait, there's a deadline? Oh, crap, I'm engaged. I mean, I'm guilty of that too. Like, mind you, I've done the same kind of thing. Like, that's one of the nice things about doing talks at conferences, right? Propose a talk on something that's not quite done. Awesome, because guess what? I'm going to make sure I get it done before the talk.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, so I mean, I can't blame them, but that's a lot of ways how the world works, man. Oh wait, your guys are being serious about this. We're almost close to being done. Well, I have all this input that I've been sitting on for 6 months. Here you go.
Yeah, no, you're right about it. And kind of the funny thing is with like talks is, I don't know how true this is for everybody, but I don't know. Like, speaking of talks and last minute talks, like or last minute putting together a talk, those are honestly some of the best talks are the ones that are put together last minute. Don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong, and I do it all. I'm pretty much one of those people that likes to refine a talk and have it done way in advance. But there are plenty of talented people who put their talks together last minute, love it. And some of my best talks are ones that I just didn't feel as confident, and I kind of put them together at the last minute, didn't have the time, and that can work out amazingly.
Yeah, AppSec EU 2009, I had talked with a good friend of mine at OWASP who was working for a bank at the time, and they were using a bunch of OWASP stuff and had this really cool story. And so I had this whole thing laid out in this presentation. It was about 1/3 this one thing they did and 2/3 this really big thing they did using OWASP material. And I think it was the day before I got on a plane to fly to Poland to do the talk. My friend called me and said, dude, I'm really sorry, but my manager heard about you doing this talk and you can't do the 2/3 part. And I'm like, I'm getting on a plane tomorrow, dude. And like 2/3 of my talk just went poof. So I like, okay, whatever, like I'll take it out. And I got to the hotel and I just basically went through and found a bunch of OWASP projects that I thought were cool and did like 1 or 2 slides on them that said, this is what it is, this is what it's useful for, this is why I like it. And I called it OWASP ROI. And I was so embarrassed to give that talk. I thought, I'm going to get booed off the stage. It's going to seem so lame. People freaking loved it. I gave that talk like 6 times. I mean, the backstory was I was like at the hotel the night before the talk going, oh shit, I have 2/3 of a deck to fill. I got to do something. So yeah, like
that can work out perfectly.
Yeah, the way the sausage is made is sometimes not so pretty, but hey, it works.
I mean, it also definitely depends on the speaker, right? Like you've done a lot of speaking. I consider you to be a talented speaker. I don't think there's any question on that. And then, so there's some aspect of that that's just, can tell a story. It's entertaining, right? And then there are definitely people that no matter how structured the talk is, not as comfortable, not as entertaining, not as engaging. So,
well, I just tend to try to ask myself, like, if I was in the shoes of the people I want to be in the audience, what would I want to hear? Right. And a lot of my talks, actually, even since that one, the OWASP ROI one in 2009, have been like, I'm running an AppSec program. How can I make your life suck a little bit less? Because it's been fairly hairy for me, the various and sundry AppSec programs I've been a part of. Right. And so that's been my shtick forever.
Seth, you've never done a talk like last minute, have you?
Oh no, never. Wait, yeah. Let me think about that. I can neither confirm nor deny exactly what you're asking me, but no, like it's interesting how that works, right? Just the pressure of procrastination and actually like those creative juices that seem to flow the night before that don't, right? I mean, I've had talks where I've got it prepared like you, right? Like in advance. It wasn't necessarily that 2/3 of it went away because I didn't have permission, but 2/3 of it I just threw away at the last minute, right? Because I'm like, you know what?
I don't like
this. Is crappy. Yeah, I don't like this anymore. I don't want to talk about this, so I'm going to just change all this, and we'll just go with it, right? But it does take a little bit of. I mean, it puts a little bit of the fear of God in you, right? As far as I get up there and I'm like, all right, that could be entertaining because I'm not sure about this content. Right? I'm really not. So what other anecdotes, what else is in there that I can actually talk about? Right. So, so you're circuitous, whatever. I can't talk today. Apparently.
An indirect path.
But your path, yeah, there you go. Your meandering path into information or into AppSec. I just had a couple of questions about that, right? So it sounds like your first main security job was penetration testing at the state?
At the state of Texas. I looked at a whole bunch of different state agencies, which was interesting. Okay. In some cases, year over year.
That is really interesting. I mean, was it like, we're talking probably early 2000s that you were, taking this job, right?
2004, 2005. Yeah.
Yeah. At that time, that's pretty, that was pretty cutting edge, right? I mean, that was about the same time that I took my first penetration testing gig or security gig. And it was at a bank. So that was more compliance related. So what were the drivers? Like, why was the state actually getting into that so soon in the cycle as opposed to, I mean, I know like the state of Utah where I live, it was years. Like, I don't think it was probably like 7 or 8 years ago that they actually formed like a penetration testing team. So what was it? What were the drivers down there that caused that to happen?
I would probably put it on the shoulders of at the time there was a CIO or whatever you want to call it of the state of Texas. Eddie Block was his name, if I'm remembering correctly, but it's been a lot of years and I've slept a lot, so I might not be. But he was a security person who happened to become the CIO of the state of Texas. And so he already had that in his background and he knew what penetration testing was. And he set up a really progressive team. Unfortunately, somebody got put in charge of him that was not as progressive. And in between when I interviewed and when I showed up for work, which was about a month, because I had to move my family from Bryan College Station over to Austin, everybody but one person I interviewed left.
And you moved. Luckily, you didn't move your entire family, right?
I didn't move my entire family. I mean, it was one of those ones. There was another case where you're like, "Oh God, what have I done?" But in retrospect, like I lived through it, and I had to learn like a whole bunch of junk on the side, and it was kind of like it was interesting, like IT archaeology going through because they had us separated from the network pen test lab with all these boxes, and I would go through and I had logins for them, and I could log in and see, oh, they set up this tool. What the heck does this tool do? I'd do a little research and go, oh, that's what that tool does. Cool. I have to play with it. And you could, it was really interesting because you could see this evidence of this very clueful team that unfortunately left right before I got there. And then luckily a good friend of mine, Dustin Dykes, that I've known ever since I was about 2005, was a contractor that was hired from AT&T to do pen testing and had done pen testing for a long, long time. He now does the Dallas Hacker Association group up in Dallas, a DHA. he was there, and luckily I could lean on him because he had done pen testing. I'm like, dude, I'm completely new at this. I know sort of what I'm doing, but like there was one time where I found a TNS listener, which is an Oracle database thing, and I could connect to it, and I pulled down a bunch of records, and I called Dustin. I was like, Dustin, dude, like, how do you know when you found a honeypot? Because this was really not that hard. And he's like, well, how many records? I'm like, I don't know, like 60,000. He goes, that's not a honeypot.
Yeah, that's just a regular.
That's just a regular, like, OMG, you got to call somebody now kind of situation. Yeah, it was, but Dustin was super helpful for me because I had somebody. That's one of the reasons why actually I got into OWASP, because after I was at the state of Texas proper, I went to TEA, which is the Texas Education Agency, K through 12 for Texas. And Bill was their AppSec guy because I had let's just say I had productive results for the chief of security there, Wendy Nather, actually, if you know Wendy Nather.
Yeah, no, we know.
I love Wendy. I got to work for Wendy. She was there at the time, and she liked what I had done in an engagement with TEA, and took me to lunch and said, "Why don't you come work for me and do AppSec?" And I'm like, "Dude, I'm totally down for that." So I was the AppSec guy at TEA, but it was 120 developers and me, and a handful of QA people, and that was it. So for me, OWASP was where I could go and kind of be amongst my tribe and talk shop, because I couldn't talk shop at work because I was the only AppSec person. So this kind of interaction we're doing here is fantastic too. Like any interaction with somebody who's been in the business and you can bounce ideas off of, that is so hugely valuable, particularly when you're new and you just don't know.
Oh yeah, that was my main. I mean, we've got a OWASP Northern Virginia chapter here, and I moved here a decade ago, and that was like that. Yeah, I was there regularly because for that reason. I mean, there's a lot of. I mean, John Stevens. I'm sure you know John Stevens.
Oh yeah, John is crazy smart dude.
yeah, he was one of the chapter leads, and we used to. I remember sitting next to him. He'd pull out his laptop and he'd be showing me like some Python code, some stuff he's working on. Actually, that was like later one of their products, but he would just sit there and just show code. I would show code, like we'd bounce ideas off each other, and like you just didn't have that if you didn't kind of like seek it out and go to those chapters. And we're fortunate enough to have a chapter here. Not everywhere. I mean, it's in a lot of places, but it's not everywhere, right?
Yeah, I feel for the people.
And even then, it's. Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Even then, it's inactive, right? No, I was just going to say, like, it definitely there's more opportunities now, right, to find that sort of a group. But I'm still surprised at the number of companies, just like Matt, your situation, the number of guys that I talk to that are in a similar style situation, especially at startups. Like you go down into like Silicon Valley or wherever, and it's like one security guy or one AppSec guy, and he's got 200 developers he's trying to support, and he's working, 10, 12-hour days. He has no one else to talk to or bounce anything off of, right? Then again, you've got like people like Ken and Asta that work in the security, fantasy world, right?
Utopia.
As we call it, utopia, right? Because they do have all of those resources. I mean, it was easy once Ken joined me over at like a consulting firm, right? And that's what we're doing on a daily basis. That team mentality is there. So you do a lot of it. You don't have to seek that out quite as much. But the recommendation to go find those people when you're in that situation is invaluable, right? You've got to get out of your shell a little bit, but you can find them.
Yeah.
Sorry, what were you going to say?
Oh, I was going to say that had a complete upward trajectory change to my professional career. Yeah, getting involved in OWASP and talking to people, and and what was it? 2008, they did a summer of code, and I signed up to do a summer of code. I got paid, I think, $2,000, which I figured I could have worked at McDonald's and probably made better hourly wages after all the time I invested. But I did what was called the OWASP Live CD back when live CDs were cool. So it was an ISO image that had a whole bunch of bundled AppSec tools on it. And that thing like went crazy. The last time I did stats on it, which was forever ago, I think it was 2010. I think it was a long time ago. It had like 300,000 downloads.
Wow, that is 300,000 is a huge number.
It was
and
crazy.
live CDs were very popular. Like there were a few around that same time, not like web app ones, just like live CD in general, like using. I don't know, was it Backtrack or something like that to pen test against those?
Yeah, the Knopics and those kind of things.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it was crazy. Like, and what was really funny is I was using, I'll give them props. I was using Bluehost, this hosting company that was literally like one of those $6 a month unlimited bandwidth shared hosting thing, and I had 2 terabytes of downloads in 1 month. And I'm like, they are either not looking at logs, or they know what I'm doing and they're just kind of turning a blind eye, or I'm on with a bunch of really dead people and I'm averaging out. But I just kind of for years on that hosting company. Kept
That's
pushing
awesome.
ISO images up to it, and they just, they were downloaded and they never complained. So, God bless them. That was really nice of them. For years, I really rode the line of the unlimited bandwidth services they provided for $6 a month.
Yeah, well, in that case, unlimited comes in handy.
Yeah. Well, if I was billed, it wouldn't have happened. I mean, not by usage. Yeah. No way.
No. So one of the things one of the things we wanted to ask you about is, your current position with OWASP is the Director of Community Operations, or Community and Operations. And, like, just basically for those who, I mean, I'm actually one of those people, I'm not familiar with what the role entails. So what is it that you're doing at OWASP currently?
So it's OWASP is a funny thing, because people think of OWASP as this, and a lot of times this big enterprisey kind of thing, I think, where these herds of security people do these awesome things, which if you talk about the community, that's definitely true. But in terms of like FTEs that actually work for the foundation, it's 6. And as of September 3rd, it will be 5. So 220 chapters and 90, well, just right under 100 projects managed by 5 people, and 2 international conferences, and I don't know how many regional events. So I do kind of everything, but on paper, I'm in charge of the community, which is really primarily chapters. And then even then, I need to give props to Dawn Aiken, who does really 99% of the grunt work with chapters. She's beautiful and very detail oriented, which I'm not. She's great. She like crosses every T and dots every I, which is not me at all. I'm very like, oh, it should just kind of work. And then the other thing I do is just operational things, like making sure the vendor who did your food for LastCon gets paid, or IT stuff. Ideally, I would like to do a lot of IT infrastructure upgrades, because honestly, most of the IT infrastructure at OWASP is very aging. And hopefully this fall, I'll have the bandwidth to get some of that done. OWASP is sort of suffering right now from its own success, in that it's grown really fast. And the staff and the IT systems haven't kept up with that growth. So we have a lot of older legacy things that are just holding us back. Finding out, even getting like our CRM really well designed and set up is not there yet. And so there are these sort of unfortunately ugly and unsexy IT backend things we have to do before the fun stuff starts. We've had a couple fun stuff things, like meetup.com. OWASP has a corporate account, whatever. And we paid some money. We didn't pay, actually. We got a volunteer from the community to write a plugin for MediaWiki, which is the wiki software we use, that you can plug in and write this one little special tag in MediaWiki, and it lists all of your meetup events magically and automatically inside of your wiki page.
Oh, that's really nice, because for the longest time it was, I think, actually, I could be wrong, and I'm thinking like when meetup.com first came out, I believe it was kind of taboo to put your meetup.com on there on the wiki, and like there wasn't any written rule against it, but if I'm not mistaken, it was kind of preferred that you do all of your stuff through the wiki, and people ended up kind of realizing like meetup.com is working better.
Right. Well, and it has like the network effects of meetup.com are awesome, and you don't get that with the wiki. The problem from an OWASP infrastructure or operational side of view is it's hard for us, particularly before we had a corporate account, to go in and go, oh wait, Cincinnati, they have a meetup, so let's log into there and see what they did. Oh, but Shanghai, they don't use Meetup, they use this other thing, so let's go in and, if you have like N number of systems and 5 employees, like, doesn't work. But with the API of Meetup and our corporate account, and we've started to really, if we find a chapter that isn't using our corporate account, we're like, hey, guess what? You're paying for it out of your chapter funds. We'll pay for it if you come here, because we get the benefit of it now being like centrally managed, and we can see and have visibility into what's going on with chapters, which is a great thing for the foundation. So there's a
Wow,
lot of those kind of things that we're trying to get to, but there's, stumbling blocks of like, oh, we'd like to do this thing. Okay, let's look. Oh, this thing behind it's broken. Okay, how do we fix this? Oh, this other thing behind it's broken. Oh, crap. Okay, fix this, then this, then this, then we can do the fun thing. So there's a couple of those sort of unsexy data management-y kind of things that we have to fix first. But once we get those shored up, we can do some kind of really cool stuff.
So there's like IT infrastructure. There's you said 220 chapters. Is that what you said?
Yeah, rough numbers. Yeah, 220 is the last number I remember. It's probably close to accurate.
There's a ton of projects. Like if you go to github.com/OWASP, and I know that's not even like I know not everything is stored under that OWASP org on GitHub, but there are there's 114 repositories. So there's plenty of projects that are on there. So a lot going on, clearly. Yeah. All the conferences. All the conferences.
Yeah, we've done one AppSec US and AppSec EU, the major sort of global AppSecs every year. And then there's been a handful of regional ones across the world. I know there's several in Europe. There's several in the US. There's been one in Japan. We did a global, what did we call that? The OWASP World Tour, where we had in Boston, in Tel Aviv, and in Tokyo, a free one-day training that OWASP just funded. And it was just literally like, hey, come on, let's do what we can. Tokyo crushed it. They had, not only did they have it in Tokyo, but they remoted it to 7 different places in Tokyo, and over 1,000 people attended that free one-day training.
Wow.
Which was rock and roll. We were like, hey, if you can get 500 people, we're happy. And they were like, no, we got 1,000. Rock on, Tokyo. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you've got IT infrastructure as an initiative. Are there any other initiatives that are kind of big on your radar for the upcoming year?
Yeah, the 2 big ones that I would say that I would love to see get completed, and it'll be interesting to see how far I get, to be real honest with you. We still have Mailman running, which, God bless us, everybody loves it who's been around for a long time, but honestly, that thing just needs to be taken out behind the barn and shot. One, because the server it's on is in a really horrible state and was never in a good state, even when I inherited it back years ago when I started kind of helping with the IT for OWASP. And 2, it's just... If you ask my daughter who's 16 about Mailman, she giggles, right?
Yeah.
It's an anachronistic thing. I might as well have a sundial on my wrist. It just doesn't work.
So I'm a Rails Goat project, which hasn't been super active as of the last maybe year. I haven't been super active as I used to be. But anyways, that aside, throughout the lifetime of that project, I've been on Mailman, and I can't honestly remember a time where a valid, anything other than spam really came through, because these days it's pretty much someone will either reach out to me directly on Twitter or I'll get an email, but more often it's an issue gets submitted or something, oh, this wasn't documented quite the way I want, or whatever the case is. So they'll open an issue on GitHub or something. I rarely, I guess I'm 2 thumbs up for killing that thing off, because I as a project leader can tell you that I don't really use it.
Yeah, the idea is to use Discourse, which is a modern forum / you can make it a mail list if you want to actually do this antiquated email thing as well. But and the other thing that gets me is we have a Slack channel, which is actually really cool. But the thing that gets me with the Slack channel is that it's not indexed by Google. And at least as ugly and awful as Mailman is, our archives were public, and you could actually Google something and find an answer in the archives back when that was more trafficked. Now we have...
That's a good point.
Yeah, we have a dying Mailman that's not really being used, but not a place where this knowledge that gets passed back and forth is indexed by a search engine. And so if we do a discourse, we now have something that, for people who are just casual OWASPers, they can actually find something in Google and answer to a question and actually find out, oh, there's this OWASP thing, and they have this cool forum, and they have information. I know there's a link to the wiki page, and I can now read about this project that'll help me with my thing, and done. So that's one of the big ones. The other big one is, it's a combination of redoing our CRM, or at least updating our CRM, and then fronting the wiki with a more brochure-ish website. So the wiki is, that's another thing. If you ask my 16-year-old daughter, she goes, oh, yeah, that wiki, it looks like a dinosaur on the internet. It's cute. I thought you were Wikipedia. And I'm like, oh, okay, fine.
You're ruining it.
You're ruining it. So we want to put something in front of the wiki, because the wiki is still actually very useful. And for wiki type, like collaborative editing in a public space, the wiki is very useful for that. But that's a small slice of what we really need in terms of a web presence. And so we want to put a more public kind of normal website in front of the wiki that's our entry page. Because honestly, if you ask like some of the other non-technical employees, like I know Kelly, when she got hired years ago for OWASP and the wiki was it, she wasn't sure that we were really a company or like a real thing. She actually asked some friends, like, is this OWASP thing real? Because I don't look at that website. That's scary.
Yeah, I mean, well, I mean,
you can always just you can always just move to WordPress, right? That'll fix it. At least you can
solve
get
all the
that
problems.
up. Right?
Yeah,
that'll solve all of it.
I mean, not only is OWASP, but also like so the field of application security. I know you both have had to, as many times as I've gone through this, I know the both of you have gone through this, where you're like, someone's like, oh, so what do you do? And you're like, oh, I do application security. Oh, so like computers, viruses, there's like AppSec's not. So now for the longest time, my wife used to tell people I was a hacker. That's what she'd tell people.
Yep.
And I was like, don't say that. That's got a negative connotation. After this many years of trying to explain what I do, I'm like, yeah, I'm a hacker. That's what I do. I'm just a hacker.
Just deal with it. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
The best I've been able to come up with is I try to make websites where they don't get hacked. Because at least then you're kind of spinning it on its head, and it's a little bit, it's still like non-technical people can get it, but it's not like I'm a hacker.
Yeah.
But my son in what was it, like 3rd grade, had to do a school thing like, what do you want to do when you grow up? And so he drew a guy with a laptop and wrote hacker on the bottom of it, and had to go in front of his class and hold up his picture that said, I want to be a hacker. Because he knew what I did. And I'm like
my dad.
I'm going to have a teacher conference now. Great.
You're getting phone calls.
Yeah. Oops.
No. Then they're just afraid of you, right? That's the one good thing about what I do is, my daughter, she's like 15 or whatever, and all her friends are scared of me because I wear black and I work on a computer and I crack things and I have lock picks around, right? And I'm like, okay, I'm just going to go with it because, right?
And you've got
kind of gives that like mystique, yeah.
Smiley skull and crossbone flags in your office.
Exactly.
Totes norm stuff, yeah.
Sequence diagrams.
It's very normal.
It's not scary.
Yeah.
So like, this is one thing I always wonder is because, when you talk about putting a new site up for OWASP, like one of the things that I've come across is the like, okay, so something like WordPress is really, it's actually really good for having, folks that are, you had mentioned non-technical staff or non-super technical staff, being able to make some edits and obviously being able to make some changes. And WordPress is really good for that. And on the other hand, we all know what happens with WordPress, probably more so WordPress plugins, which I think is maybe the mitigation there, limiting WordPress plugins, keeping it up to date. I know there's some like stuff to help with, automatic email alerts of like this plugin's vulnerable or this version. But I mean, is that sort of like something you're coming across where you have to sort of make a balance of like this needs to be contributed to by other people, so it needs to be friendly enough to?
Definitely that's a thing, because there's the sort of technological Darwinists who say if they can't figure it out, they don't deserve to contribute. But honestly, that's not how I believe. Because if somebody has something valuable to contribute, like stumbling over technology is the last thing I'd like them to do. So that definitely is an issue. And there are certain things you can do depending on how crazy you want to be with WordPress. WordFence is a great plugin that alerts you whenever a plugin goes stale, and it shoots you an email. You can go log in and, click update. The newer WordPress is actually auto update core, which is super fantastic.
Awesome.
Yeah, because we've had some regional conferences that want to set up WordPress, and it's like, okay, like I'll do that, but like then I got to babysit the thing a little bit more than like AppSec US and AppSec EU are using Jekyll to do a site that's primarily in Markdown and GitHub. And then I wrote a little bit of code that pulls out every time there's a webhook that comes whenever there's a commit, I hear the commit on the server, pull down the latest, rebuild the static, stomp on the existing static site, and Bob's your uncle, right? It's just updated. Like,
Right.
I love those. Operationally, those are like stupid easy to maintain. But you have to have somebody who's comfortable doing Markdown and shoving it into GitHub, which is not everybody.
Yeah, Seth and I have both come across that where it's like, it's exactly that. It's that Markdown isn't necessarily even if you're doing it through the web UI, it's like, okay, I have to go to this site and I need to create an account, and then I need to go to, wait, where do I need to go on there? Okay, so then what do I do? What do I call the file? How do I create the file? Okay, and then I need to edit it. What's Markdown? Like very, very quickly. And whereas, you can create them an account, same thing, create them an account on WordPress or whatever. And then they log in, but like it's much more intuitive. By the way, I actually posted that a link to WordFence.
Good.
For anybody that wants to check it out.
OWASP has used them for years, the free version, not their premium version. Sorry, WordFence. But it has worked, at least the free version has worked great for us, because the events that wanted to run WordPress, I would at least get an email that said, hey, on this site, this plugin's outdated. I could log in, click, 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 and it's updated and then done.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's simple enough.
Yeah. And they block putzes, which is another good thing too. That's another funny thing. Like, oh shoot, I'm pulling numbers from memory, so these are not highly accurate, but we have Signal Science has donated their agent, and it's on www.owasp.org, and we got 8 million requests, I think, last week. And of those, oh shoot, what was it? Like 400,000 were attacks, according to Sig Science. And you wouldn't believe how many people, I know what it is. Like, dude gets Dirbuster from the website and goes, how do I use this? Dirbuster, www.owasp.org, boom. And then we have Sig Science now. It sees that and just blocks them after so many bad requests. But it was funny because we put that in place, and we had such a drop in crap traffic, basically, like internet background noise, that I was able to go to a smaller VM.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it's insane. Like, and I know we are like probably skewing the numbers horribly at Sig Sciences, because our percentage of Tor traffic is through the roof, which I'm sure is not any other place on the internet. Like cooking sites probably don't have any Tor traffic. Ours has loads of it. And we get a lot of tool traffic and stuff. It's been kind of fun. Actually, in the Slack channel, there's an infrastructure-IP blocked or something like that Slack channel in the OWASP Slack that when Sig Science blocks somebody, I just post to that channel if you really are curious and want to see. It's kind of fun. Although I say that now, someone's going to go like, I'm going to run Nmap and watch my IP show up.
Yeah.
Which I did that, or they're going to,
yeah.
I did that to myself as a Linux sysadmin. I put port sentry on one of my boxes when I was at A&M, and I'm like, well, I should test to see if it works. Nmap my server, right? And then I'm like, my SSH session. Oh, son of a! I got to walk to the server room now. I just banned myself. Crap.
So one of the things
that sounds familiar.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. I was gonna.
Go ahead. I'm stepping on.
Yeah. No, you're fine. I was going to just step into kind of one of the next things that we wanted to talk about, specifically like that I'm interested in is your work on DefectDojo, right? I know Ken already posted the link to that a little bit. But for those of us that aren't familiar, or those that are listening that aren't familiar, can you give us kind of a rundown of where that came from, what the purpose behind it is, and just a general overview?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. DefectDojo, oddly enough, many years ago when I was at Rackspace, the product security team needed a way to manage findings or issues we had with various and sundry products, right? And we looked at commercial products; none of them really made us happy. And Rackspace is pretty much an open source friendly kind of place, so we just wrote our own. That was this thing called Test Tracker. I left Rackspace. The people I know there, Greg Anderson, now one of the project leads of DefectDojo, was still there. He's working on it, improving it, and actually talked Rackspace into open sourcing it. And so that became DefectDojo, because Test Tracker and trying to find that uniquely, whatever, it got renamed to DefectDojo. And then it's since been up for, I don't know how long it's been on GitHub, 3+ years, maybe more. And just in the last probably year and a half, it's really had some substantial growth. There's 40+ committers. It's really got a one of the committers, Aaron Weaver, did a sort of a UI makeover on it and really improved the look and feel of how it works. And
I was gonna say that the UI is really nice, like the dashboard info and just the way it looks is like super nice.
yeah, and one of the interesting things that I've liked about DefectDojo, there's a couple things. The data model is very useful in that it understands application and infrastructure issues, which a lot of the tooling kind of fall on one side of that camp or the other. And then the other thing I like is the fact that the way it manages, it was really a way to manage security activities. So there's this idea in DefectDojo of an engagement. An engagement is just honestly a bucket to put one or more security activities. So I'm going to go look at the Bob product. Okay, we're going to do a static analysis and a manual pen test, and we're going to run, I don't know, app scan against it, let's say, right? So these 3 activities can be wrapped up in an engagement, and then you can manage that interaction with that product, say, as an engagement in DefectDojo. And actually recently, Aaron added an idea of doing CI/CD. We're doing sort of continual scans as opposed to sort of point in time as well. So it'll handle both of those use cases now, which is really fantastic. And then I did a training at Locomoco last year on DefectDojo and the AppSec pipeline and security automation, or AppSec automation, really. And one of the guys in there was actually he worked for a company that literally just did pen testing. And he said, "Is this useful to me?" And I'm like, "Well, each client could be an engagement, right? And all of your findings go into there, and you're done, right? You could easily manage it that way, right? So, heck, it's open source. If you want to open up or fire up a DefectDojo per client, you could do that too, right? It's Dockerized. Docker the thing, up it for client 1. Everything lives in that Docker. When you're done, tear it down and poof, off it goes, right? So it's basically a vulnerability manager for infrastructure and application vulnerabilities with, I don't remember how many, a whole load of different ways that it can import tools. And then if there's a tool that it doesn't know about, you just have to coerce it to CSV, and there's a generic CSV importer.
Nice. Yeah, there are paid for versions of that, but nothing. Well, I don't know I mean, I'm not going to say nothing. I don't know of any free software that that would be really useful as a consultant, especially if you can share that with another consultant as well. That's or have some sort of that and have some historical data. So because we've talked about it on this podcast with several people, where we talk about the whole, you come in, do an assessment, do a report, come back 6 months later, first thing you do, go through what you found last time, because there's a good chance a pretty high percentage of it hasn't been fixed.
Oh yeah, when I was working for the state, definitely. You pulled last year's pen test report and went through the findings, and some percentage of them were still there. Absolutely.
Yeah, so it's nice to have some place with historical context of what all you found from last year, but also being able to share it with other people and having that data centrally managed, basically.
Yeah, the other nice thing is there's a REST API as well. So you can actually do automation if you're into that, with Python, Ruby, pick your language, doesn't matter. I do Golang, whatever you like, right? Write it and talk HTTP to the REST API. And then another interesting thing is it has this idea of environments. So it knows if you tested, particularly in a product security type role, dev, test, or prod, let's say, if those are your magic 3. And it'll track things, particularly on the source code side, down to the commit that you're testing. So I tested the static analysis of this thing by pulling it out of Git on this commit level, and this is what I found. That kind of level of detail is all in there too.
That is awesome, because so that's something that I personally do, and I don't know of a lot of people. I don't know, maybe a lot of people do it, but I hadn't seen anyone previously where I actually will put here's the commit at which I did an assessment, and then that way, you just know, okay, well, if something was introduced, when was it introduced? So it's kind of a good just kind of record keeping.
Yeah, well, I found a bug in a particular open source piece of software that was written and using Subversion at the time. And I basically it was easy to reproduce the bug. So SVN checkout, master. Nope. Okay, back one, back one, back one, back one, back one, back one. Oh, this one works. This one doesn't. Okay, delta those two. Okay, here's your bug. Right? Now, it makes life really easy if you can actually track those numbers and know. The other nice thing, too, is if you can track those numbers, like you said, if there's something introduced, your delta is only the difference between those commits, not all of the source code. And I'd much rather work with a handful of diffs than a big body of source code.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I use git blame quite a bit these days for that reason, not to literally blame somebody, but to find out like where, because sometimes when bugs get introduced, it's not necessarily like, I'm not talking about a critical bug. I'm talking about your more like innocuous, kind of just very low severity bugs. And even maybe more like, where do we want to land on this? Like, what's our judgment on this? Is this something is it more of a pain in the ass for us to like basically fix this, but cause a headache with customers? You know what I mean? Like something that could go either way. So then, yeah, sometimes you just want to know like, what's the reasoning? Why did we make this change? Because there might be like, we knew that there might've been a conversation and it might've been like, yeah, this is really subjective, you know, and the risk does not outweigh, you know, the cost or vice versa.
Or like the real world thing of like, by the way, this company that spends a load of money with us per month needs this feature.
Right.
Right. And so, yes, we can fix it, but we lose this customer who's giving us $1 million a month. Well, you can buy a lot of remediation for $1 million a month. You know?
Yeah, you really can.
So, you know, there's like business.
You can buy a lot of insurance that way. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, there's like real world, you know, beyond just the technical security nuances that come into play, particularly when you're dealing with product security and things that are, you know, sold to people. That's one of the things, like I said earlier, I really like about AppSec is you have these interesting intersections of like business is trying to make money. And by the way, that business is your paycheck. And you want it to be as secure as possible, but not make it unsellable.
Yeah, you have to make trade. I mean, it is never black and white. Oh, well, okay. I shouldn't say that. There are definitely times where it's black and white. What I should say is there are often those gray areas where it is very subjective, and it's like, what's the trade-off? I mean, that's what I think. That's kind of that. It definitely is what keeps this job interesting for sure.
Yeah, when I did a lot of pen testing, it got to where it felt like I was just. I mean, it was fun, mind you. It's fun breaking things. There's no doubt about that. But after a while, you do kind of like, for me, I was like, I've written all these reports for like 3 years, and like all I did is find all this stuff broken, and I never see it fixed. And you just like have this very jaded view of the world, like everything's crap and all the web apps are broken. Okay. And so like getting internal, that's one of the reasons why I went to Rackspace, honestly, was I could get internal and actually follow these things from like, we found badness. We talked about badness. We figured out how to mitigate badness. Now badness is mitigated. And that whole like life cycle is actually really interesting to me.
Yeah, I definitely enjoy the defense side of things more these days than the consulting. Consulting like can be a real grind, but that's it
has its pluses and minuses. The fun clients. Yeah, well, like the fun clients, you know, if nothing else, you say, guess what? They only have, you know, 10 hours more of my time, and then I'm moving on to next client, right? If it's really a fun client. But then you do have some really interesting clients that really care and are super engaged, and those guys are great.
Yeah, Stephen Edwards has referred to what we do in consulting as being mercenaries, which is pretty somewhat accurate. You know, you come in, you hit them hard, you find a bunch of stuff, you hand off. Hey, these are the nasty things I did, and then you walk away. You get your paycheck and walk away. You know,
you come back the next year.
Yep.
Yep. I've done that a lot. It is fun. I mean, and the one thing that's nice about consulting too is the variety, right? And I've flopped between being internal and being a consultant, probably because after a while you're like, okay, all I'm doing is dealing with internal business politics. I'm sick of this crap. I just want an anonymous consultant kind of relationship, right? And then you do that for a while and you're like, oh, I want to actually deal with some real people. So you go back in, at least for me, I've flip-flopped my whole career back and forth. Like,
now it's been the same.
Internal.
Yeah, it's been the same. Sometimes, you know, you get tired of it, and it happened with me at Living Social. I was just like,
I need to change. Yeah. I've definitely been there.
Yeah, we're all doing the same thing, and we're all in different like stages depending on where we're at. So Matt, tell me how you got hooked up with OWASP as far as being one of the only, 5 or 6 employees there. How did that actually come about?
That was an interesting story. So for the longest time, I was kind of a contractor on the side with OWASP where they needed someone to do IT-ish kind of Linux sysadmin stuff, and they had nobody. So I said, guess what? You can hire me as an IT contractor. I'll do 10 hours a week, so 40 hours a month. Pay me $1,000 and we'll call it even, which is not really an awesome hourly rate, but hey, it's a charity and why not help them? And I did that for years. And then they were looking, this was 2 years ago. They were looking for what they called a senior technical project coordinator. And I pinged somebody I knew on the board at the time, and I said, I don't even know what that is. Like, what are you looking for? Because where I'm at, I'm kind of frustrated and stuck. And like, if we can work something out, maybe I'll come work for OWASP. Like, why not? I like OWASP, and working for a charity is kind of cool. Let's see what happens. And they were like, oh, we didn't think someone like you would apply. And I'm like, well, like I am. So let's figure this out. And they ended up hiring me, honestly. And that's kind of how it fell out. They weren't really looking to hire. They wanted someone to sort of oversee projects in a more technical level. And I can obviously do that and did a lot more. And then when they got the executive director, Karen Staley, which was last November, if I remember correctly, I was actually at Duo Security, and I bumped into her at Snowfrock and was really impressed with what she was doing with the foundation and her desire and goals and how she wanted to really sort of professionalize and sort of, like I said, OWASP has grown a whole bunch and hasn't had a chance to catch up with that growth in terms of its internal maturity. And she's all about getting that done. So I came back, and I'm pretty darn happy about it.
Well, the foundation's better for it. I mean, I know there's been there's been all kinds of ups and downs, but I think that like everybody that we've talked to is talking about sort of the positive direction that OWASP is taking in a trajectory this year, next year. So which is really nice to see, because let's be honest, like we don't have the this is where all of us are at. This is like this is the community. So
we probably have a year of make internal systems better and get some like foundational work done, but then I think it's going to explode. So maybe this like 6 months to a year isn't going to be super exciting. There'll be subtle small changes, but it's going to really snowball, I would imagine, in about a year, which is going to be great. Like I'm very much looking forward to that.
Well, and that's the good thing. I think about the rest of like the security community. Obviously, Matt, you've been around for a while and you've dealt with some of the other organizations that are out there from a security perspective. And as far as application security goes, there's not really any other one source that I can point to, right? Whether that's resources and reports on, hey, guess what? You want to know what cross-site scripting is? Here's a short description, but if you really want to know, go check out this site, right? It's not some random blog post, but there's an organization that's out there that can explain it well, that's got, chapters around, that there's people that can support you in that. Or you want to learn about application security, this is where you go to. And they speak to both developers and security people. And there's not really anything else, any other places that I can point people, right? I mean, I think about the other conferences that exist. If I send somebody to DEF CON that's a developer, they don't get out of it probably what they need to from a security perspective. They just don't.
Yeah, there's going to be some really cool, interesting talks, but nothing maybe in their wheelhouse.
Exactly. Or, you point them at a developer conference, right? And there's very few security talks. They don't necessarily dig into all the aspects of application security that we want them to know about. They may talk about, again, one or two little things that are relevant to that new framework or that new feature, but it's not going to be enough for them to actually get a full view of how I protect my application. And so I go back and forth, and from being super engaged with OWASP, and then depending on how busy work gets, right? Obviously we kind of fade back and forth. Like it sounds like right? You're working for OWASP, you've gone away, you've come back.
Yep.
But I really don't see anything else in the community that provides that same value. Right?
And that's honestly,
unless I'm wrong.
Yeah, and that's honestly one of the reasons why I came back, because it's like I really want to see OWASP survive and thrive, because I think it is the one sort of place that has that AppSec developer focus. Because I've done talks at QA conferences, a couple of them here and there, and I did one, like I said, at Velocity, very different group, and it was interesting, but I was like the one oddball security person talking at this Velocity conference or this QA conference, and I was just like, look at the weird guy on stage, he's talking about security, this is kind of neat, right? But it wasn't like bread and butter. Like, this is how you actually make your life better when you're trying to secure apps. And that exists at OWASP in spades.
Yeah, and I mean it's easy to
and I mean it's hard, right? Like I think last year I spoke locally here at like the Big Mountain Data Conference, right? And it was very much the same thing. It's a whole bunch of guys that are talking about big data, and then I'm talking about security because there's people there that are developing apps in Hadoop and other places, and I'm like, you got to think about this stuff. But realistically, I had like it's a 400 or 500 person conference, and I have like 10 people show up to talk about security, and that's pretty much what you expect at a conference like that, right?
Yeah.
And it's hard because that is our audience. That is who we should be talking to as application security professionals. But I don't know how else to drive that forward, right? OWASP is a great place to start and to push people. But like, what are your recommendations around that? Like, how do you think we engage with that wider community?
Yeah, and I'll be honest with you, that is a domain that I'm probably not much of an expert in, and I'm really happy that Karen is here because she's much more attuned. And it's funny, Karen and also Harold Blankenship, OWASP hired recently to manage projects, and both of them are not OWASPers. And as a 10-year, I mean, April of 2008 was my first interaction with OWASP when I did the Summer of Code. So I have 10 years. Like, I'm jaundiced kind of and have way lots of experience. And I've been very refreshed at the fact that both Harold and Karen are going, wait a minute, you did it this way. Why did you do it this way? And my answer is usually like, well, because we always did it that way. And they're like, well, why? I'm like, because we always did it that way. And I love the fact that both of them are really sort of questioning a lot of the things we've done and said, well, have you thought about doing it this way? And Karen is very big about trying to get some metrics and understand who's coming to our conferences in particular in terms of the audience and how to drive people that aren't currently attending to it. But you sort of have to have this is how I say we have to have a year of foundational data gathering, and then we can start pushing into those other areas where we really need to be involved. And I know Lisa is another OWASP employee. She's been doing a lot of co-marketing. And it kind of co-marketing honestly used to be, hey, if somebody reach out to us, we'll go, hey, yeah, we'd like to co-market with you. What the hey? But it was more of a like you talk to us, not us talk to you. And now Lisa is proactively going out and talking to those orgs and co-marketing with those orgs that we want to be involved with.
Okay. No, and that makes sense, right? It's definitely organizational maturity. And I think a lot of that does come from the fact that it grew so quickly, right? You think about the OWASP top 10 and how that just exploded, right? Especially due to PCI, right? Let's be honest. PCI drove that just huge. And the organization itself didn't necessarily support that, or it didn't have the people or the aptitude to support it at the level that it needed to be. So you've got to catch up at some point. So I'm glad to see that it's actually happening. And obviously Ken and I are huge advocates of OWASP and everything that you guys do there. Besides the fact that we attend chapters, we speak at chapters all the time, and we're constantly pushing people that direction. But would love to help out more as we can, and just keep promoting it so that you guys have the support that you need.
Yeah, my suggestion to everyone is we love constructive feedback. Dumb things and big things. Like, we had someone say, hey, by the way, your prices for AppSec US on this one page vary from the actual registration page. And it was a typo. I mean, that's all it was. Crap. Okay, fine. Let's fix it. Right. But it's interesting when you work for OWASP because, I'm in essence 9 to 5, although that's kind of a pipe dream for any of us. Because I'm doing crap at midnight sometimes, and that's just how life is. But I have a sort of normal day-ish window that I'm trying to work in, and then a lot of the community is nights and weekends. So you have this inevitable time lag of it's 10 o'clock on Tuesday, and I'm done with work and eating, and I just thought of this thing. I'm going to ask you a question. But honestly, I'm hanging out with my family till the next morning, so you're going to have to wait a bit. And there's those kind of things that make it kind of challenging and interesting. And it's funny because where was I at? Dang it, I was at a conference. They asked me to speak in Vegas. Oh, I don't remember what the conference was, But I was eating lunch at a random table with random people. Like, who do you work for? Oh, I work for OWASP. Oh, OWASP, I know about OWASP. Like, and I asked them, like, how big do you think OWASP is? They're, oh, it's really huge. You've got like tons of employees. I'm like, no, we got 6. And they went, what?
It's a volunteer organization. I mean,
yeah. And it's surprising, that it's not, a big corporate something behind it. It's a bunch of scrappy individuals getting together and trying to make the world better.
So if somebody wants
we appreciate your work at it. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, Ken.
No, I was going to say, so, on that note of, volunteerism and OWASP being what it is, what are some ways you recommend people to get involved and to help out OWASP, in the coming year if they would like to do that?
Several ways. Probably the easiest way is to grab one of our projects, use it, and provide feedback. I mean, like I said, I've had the OWASP Live CD that morphed into OWASP WTE. That's now the AppSec pipeline. It's at this sort of weird evolution over 10 years. Like, even when I was getting the 300,000 downloads that I told you about earlier, I probably got 20 emails about it. And you're like, I know there's loads of people using this, and I know I am far from perfect. Why am I not hearing more bugs or issues? Or, hey, it'd be cool if you could add this tool. Or, hey, why does it not work this way? And I mean, as someone who's done open source for a long, long time, feedback is just so useful. And that perspective, like, I remember I wrote this wrapper around, this is WebScarab to give you an idea how long ago it was, which was a reverse proxy like Burp or Zap. I wrote a wrapper around that so that when you launched it, it would dynamically, well, actually, when I first did it, it fixed the memory at a gig. Because, like, I'm in the States and I have a gig of RAM in my laptop, no biggie, right? I got an email from someone in Egypt who said, I don't even have a gig in my laptop, so every time I try to launch WebGoat, it freezes my box. And I went, oh, crap. Never thought about that one.
Hadn't planned for that, no.
Yeah, so I just wrote a little script that you could either on the command line set a thing and it would remember it, or it would default to a gig. So if you didn't have much RAM, you could say, webgoat -- RAM equals 500, and it would give you 500 megs. And it might be slow, but at least it's going to run in your box. So, like, feedback is hugely valuable to anybody who runs a project. And that's a great way. And then even contributing, like, we'll get random people post to there's a contact us form, which is like a generic sort of intake form for feedback to OWASP. People will put in there, hey, I noticed there's a spelling mistake on this page of the wiki, and drop a link. Great, awesome, like, fine, we'll go, like, make that little typo correction. Even dumb things like that just make OWASP better. So that doesn't have to be sort of a high bar of entry. I don't need you to be some, like, uber elite hacksaw to be helpful to OWASP. You just need to be willing to chip in and help in an area. I would say pick an area that interests you, because obviously you're going to be more engaged. Don't pick something you don't care about. Like, if you're not into static analysis, don't do static analysis kind of stuff. Do policy stuff or whatever's your bag, right? Pick that and run with it.
Awesome. So,
well, that's good advice. I mean, that's good advice in getting involved in the community as it is, right?
True enough.
Start from where you're at, and then move from there. Find something that's interesting to you. I mean, that was going to be my next question to you, but if you wanted to add anything more to that, right? Somebody who's interested in application security and, coming straight out of school or something like that, what would your advice to them be?
Ooh, interesting. Well, one, and probably number one, is realize we were all clueless at some point in time. I did not pop out of the womb with the AppSec brain I have now after 10 plus years in the field, right? Like, I had a very different brain. And like I said earlier, when I was writing my first apps, they were a basket case. And that's okay. Like, it's less about knowing everything and more about willing to engage and learn, right? That's kind of the crucial thing. And understanding that you may not feel like, you may have the imposter syndrome thing where you don't feel like you can be valuable. But honestly, like, even just like, when I do training in particular, and a lot of times the training isn't with people that are super technical, I learn a ton just from the questions that get asked, because it's a perspective that I've never encountered. Like, hey, we're trying to do this interesting thing with Docker, and it doesn't work this way in this one particular edge case. And I thought, oh, crap, I've never even tried to make it do that. That's a cool thing. I need to play with that, tonight at the hotel, because I've never thought about doing it that way, right? So you may not think you may think your question is naive or not valuable, but honestly, it is. It really is. Particularly if it's. I mean, the big thing is like obviously don't be a schmuck, right? Don't be the, hey stupid, why didn't this thing work? And provide no details, right? Like the sort of the terrible bug report. I ran your thing and it crashed. I don't like it. Okay, that's some interesting facts. Why don't you tell me I ran this thing and this message got output to the terminal, and here at me copying it, pasting it into a GitHub issue, I could fix that. But like, I don't like it, it crashed, not so useful, right?
Yep. Yeah, cool, good. Well, yeah, we've been going for over an hour at this point. Like we said, it always just kind of flows. Ken, you had something that you wanted to bring up though, so.
No, I think we're good. The only last thing is kind of like, asking Matt if there's, anything you want to kind of, I did want to mention again that you are training at giving training at LastCon, October 23rd through the 26th, I think it was.
Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah, that sounds right.
And, just anything else you might want to leave people with.
The only other thing we haven't really touched on, and we don't need to burn a lot of time on it, but I should mention is the AppSec pipeline project that Aaron and I do is all about sort of automation of AppSec teams. In particular, when he and I worked together at a previous employer, Pearson, we had, what was it, 2,500 to 1,000, depending on who you asked, applications, 5,000 developers. We were on every continent but Antarctica, and there was 8 at its peak AppSec people. So, like, in those odds, you're like doomed. So one of the things we did was come up with this idea of automation, and like a CI/CD pipeline. The idea is, right, you do a bunch of things, and at the end, you hopefully have a deployable artifact. With an AppSec pipeline, you do a bunch of things. At the end, you have findings. Let's say these are existent issues with these systems. And so we've done a lot of work on automating both, that, and then also describing. We have a bunch of diagrams on the wiki page, also in our GitHub, a sequence diagram. That's what's behind me, to sort of help people think through that. Because honestly, like I made a little thing called GASP Docker, which is my really bad naming. GASP is Golang Application Security Pipeline. And it's a little thing you can run on your laptop. It'll fire off Dockers with tools in them and do things like, I ran it against 36 Python repositories, and it came back in 3 minutes, having analyzed all of them, pull them down, run them, get the results, save it into DefectDojo. And that was 3 minutes and 3.5 minutes of time to do 36. So like pretty dang fast.
Versus a manual assessment on
during a manual assessment. Now, yeah, this must be you. You must be this high to ride the ride kind of testing. It's certainly not like, deep penetration testing type of stuff. But if I could do that across my suite of apps, now I have sort of at least set a bar. And I know the ones that are basket case. And I sort of have a map of my existing app landscape to know, like, these are the ones that are high risk, but they don't have many issues, at least in this baseline thing. But these are also high risk and they have a ton of issues. I'm going to burn time here and not over here. Because a lot of times, honestly, when I've run AppSec programs, and if people would be honest with you, it's kind of like, this one's latest and loudest, I'm going to go look at it, right? It's not really rational, thought out, planned out, oh, this one is the high risk and it has a lot of issues. And if you can get your testing down to where even if it's not super thorough, it's fast, I can now run that across a suite of things continually. Aaron set this up where he's working, and I think he ran his pipeline like 5,000 times in the course of 2 months.
Wow, 5,000 times in 2 months that's a lot.
But if like you can run a tool and it takes a minute to run, you can just tie it into a GitHub commit, and every commit rerun the thing. Maybe it doesn't come back with anything, but so what? Like the minute it does, it knows. Like one really cool thing Aaron did with his pipeline is he would write tests that would pass only when the bug he found was fixed. So say I find cross-site scripting in this page. Great, I'm going to write a test that exercises that, and it's only going to go green when it's fixed. And he actually told his development team, oh, by the way, in that last push, you fixed this cross-site scripting issue, you can close that bug. Like, nice. When does security do that? Like, never. So yeah. If you can do that kind of automation, it really starts to change the game. And that's the stuff I've been talking about in the last year and a half. I've really been talking about it for years, but it's really matured in the last probably year and a half.
No, that's modern application security at its best. You're doing sort of it sounds like a combination of asset management, risk analysis, in tandem with just straight up automation and getting things triaged.
Yep. Yeah, big thing. And then the nice thing too is like we did some of this even at Rackspace in a very early version. But the other nice thing about having a lot of automated tooling is, say you are doing a manual assessment, you can run your 15 tools against that thing and get results back in 10, 20 minutes. And then you spend the rest of your manual time doing the stuff that tools can't reach. Instead of, like, I don't know how many times I got paid a high hourly rate when I was a pen tester to do cipher strength testing, right? I mean, that's kind of dumb, honestly.
Yeah.
It's not complicated testing.
Right. I mean, that's a good point. Use automation to give you the time to do the human aspect, use your skill, use what you're bringing to the table.
Yeah, like freaky business logic problems that tools will never find.
And you can spend more energy and more time on those things. So,
yep.
Yeah, that's awesome. And by the way, I posted a link to that project. And I am now actually pasting the GitHub link as well. And awesome. You did have Jimmy Mesta. He wanted to thank you for all your hard work on the pipeline project and in general. So
he's a great guy. So props right back at him. We've
had Jimmy on twice. And Jimmy is super knowledgeable when it comes to like containerization and technologies like that. So.
Well, it's funny because like I feel like I know that domain some until you find somebody like him who lives it and breathes it. I play on the edges of it, and I know it probably better than a good chunk of people, but like that homie's really got it down.
yeah, he definitely does. Like he got the first time he was on, he got hammered with questions, and he knew the answers to every single one of them. So it was amazing.
Yeah, no, he's awesome in that domain.
Yep. Awesome. Seth, anything else you wanted
to? No, I just wanted to thank Matt for coming on and, sharing his knowledge and experience with us. Obviously that stuff's really interesting. I got distracted because I started browsing your GitHub repo for GASP and all of that's in there. Cause I'm like, ooh, well, I can really use this. I've spoken on, automating security unit testing for a little while. I'm like, hey, I could plug into this pretty easily for some of the stuff that I've been doing. So
there's a load of Docker files there that are automated, that have automated the tools. And it's what's really cool is the way that those Docker files are written. You can almost use the Docker like a command line executable, where you pass arguments into the Docker and it just gets handed off to, say, the tool and runs.
Oh yeah, yeah. Because I'm looking at everything like with Bandit, Brakeman, and Nikto, and all that stuff that's running in there. That's very useful, and that's something that I can pass to a lot of the development teams that I work with. Right? Hey, it looks like you're having problems keeping stuff up to date. Why don't you just go and run this, or go run Nikto against it and tell me what your current problems are, right? So
yep. Well, that's one of the reasons why I love Docker, because I could run it for realsies in like ECR and ECS with Amazon, but if the developers want to use it, like it's a Docker file, like fine, like the Docker build and run it on your own box. Done.
Yep. Yeah. Run it locally before it gets pushed, so that it never touches. If there's a problem, you can fix that before you push the code, right?
Yep.
So, cool. Yeah. Outside of that, right? Look forward. Let's get together while we're down at AppSec USA. We can go chat, or people can come find us there, right? And come say hi to Matt.
Yep, I will be there.
Cool. Ken, anything else?
No, just again, thank you for joining us and answering all our questions and letting people get to know you a little bit better. Appreciate it.
No worries. It was fun, and thank you for inviting me. It was great. I'll do it again sometime if you guys get desperate or bored.
No, awesome. Like, we like to have people come back on. Usually, it's like a couple months after, but yeah, we love to have folks like yourself come back on, especially to give us a follow up with where OWASP is at, how the projects are going. So that would be amazing.
Oh, cool. Yeah, that would be great then. I would love to do that. Yeah, hit me in like, 4 or 6 months, and I should have a lot of news to tell you.
Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Good. Cool. Outside of that, next week, I think we've got Dave Ferguson on, a good friend of Ken and I's that we've worked with for years. He works, I think, currently still at Qualys, if I remember right. But yeah, join us next week to talk with him. If anybody's got additional questions for Matt, Twitter's probably the best way, or is there some other way that they should reach you?
Yeah, Twitter is probably the best way. It's Matt_Tesauro. There's actually an M Tesauro that's a like Maria or Tesauro or something. I don't know. That name squatted my usual username, but that's okay.
Well, so don't send questions to her about OWASP. Is that what you're saying?
You can, but you won't like the answer.
Well, we've got we've got your Twitter handle in the link, and also in the, if it's not in the description, we'll make sure it ends up in the description. So
okay, perfect.
Yeah,
Awesome.
it'll be linked on the site as well. So thanks again for joining us, and we'll talk to everybody next week. Hit us up if you have any questions, or you have anything that you want to, if you want to join the Slack channel, we've got that available, or if you want a sticker or something along those lines, find us and we'll get you one. So.
Awesome. Well, thank you again.
All right.
Thank you. All right. Have a good night, everyone.